We musicians are complicated creatures. Our passions for the music overflows into everything. As artists, we've got a lot to talk about. So let's dive right into today's conversation.
Hi, Earl.
Hi, Steph.
How you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing well because we're together today for a conversation for our Love, Life, Wisdom, and Drums conversations.
And is today's conversation about love, life, wisdom, or drums?
Well, you know, they're going to know this by now, but they're all connected. Today we are focusing in on drums, and we are focusing in on your cover music and why you choose the songs that you choose, and some of the what I was calling behind the covers.
Okay.
And so why don't we start out? You happy with that? You good with that?
That's fine. You do whatever you want to do. It's your show. You're asking questions today, and we'll go where we go.
What a good husband, eh? You know, I love you, babe.
Me too.
Okay, so I was thinking, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of your personal favorite covers, and then I also want to talk. Well, let's start with some of my favorite covers that you've done. And it always seems that you show me a cover that you've done that Hal Blaine played on. And Hal Blaine, I'm not sure your whole community knows the magnitude of Hal Blaine's work, but he was really, really, really big in the 60s and 70s, right?
Yeah, he was huge in the 60s and 70s. He was probably one of the first studio drummers, called studio drummers. Even though they had studio drummers before that, guys that played on movies and things like that. But he's one of the recognized studio drummers. He was from LA. There was a whole group in New York and Nashville. But he was one of the first recognized studio drummers. He made it the thing to be. Him and Earl Palmer.
Earl Palmer, I know that name too.
Right.
Because I was wondering about why you choose, like what it is about Hal Blaine's drumming that you have chose so many songs by him, or is it just that he was on so many songs that so what was it about his music that makes you choose his songs?
Well, number one, the music I do normally for covers are I would say is music that I want to do, things that are familiar to me, things that make me happy, things that when I play the music or listen to the music, I smile.
Yeah.
So a lot of that has to do with the fact that Hal Blaine played on a lot of that music, even though I didn't know it was Hal Blaine playing on it. You know, I didn't know Hal Blaine played with the Beach Boys, or he played with the Association, or he played with John Denver or Frank Sinatra. I mean, I didn't know who he played with when I heard it the first time.
Yeah.
You know, actually, the first time I recognized Hal Blaine's name was on a Karen Carpenter album, a Carpenter's album.
Yeah.
So
we love to play that stuff. I especially love the one that you just did recently when I used to sing with you all the time when we were in the band together. Won't Last a Day. I love that song. I mean, the sentiments in that song. I go toward the sentiment. I go toward the vocals, her rich vocal voice and stuff. But I always loved having you play that behind me when I was leading in the band.
I didn't realize how much you loved that back then. I wish I'd realized it, how much you loved it.
You didn't realize that?
You know, I was such a crotchety trying to be a musician back then, you know, in my 20s trying to be a musician, and playing weddings was kind of like, I really wanted to be in a rock band and I really wanted to be on the big stage, but I'm doing this. I missed a lot of the joy of the gigs we did back then, and I didn't realize how much it was fun for us. And so later in life you kind of reflect back and go, wow, those were some of the best times, was those gigs, you know.
I really appreciate you saying that, and saying that out loud, and saying that in public, and recording it, you know, for your friends and your drum community, because you know, we don't always know in our relationships why we do the things we do and how those things affect each other, right? And so I did know that you really wanted to be on the big stage, and those were some of the years you were on the big stage, but you were doing 3 and 4 musical things at once. So you were on the big stage, but you're right. I think it meant a lot more to me than it did to you. It meant us getting by financially because we got double pay. You got your note, I got mine. And so we could come home on a Saturday night at 1 p.m. and like know that we had, you know, food shopping money and pay the car payment.
Paid the bills.
Right. But it did mean a lot to me. Like I always loved being on the stage, entertaining people and watching people dance arm in arm and having fun. Those kinds of celebrations that made me feel like we were creating an environment for people to just show they cared and loved. And, I don't know, it just gave me such great joy. As much as I miss it, I don't pine for it because it was really a good season. What was it, like 15, 20 years we did it?
Yeah, I think we did it for a good 15 years,
Yeah.
in New Jersey. And we had a band for a good 6, 7 years. And then we would do freelance gigs together. And that was kind of,
Yeah.
Kind of after you developed your own chops and stuff and had your repertoire and stuff. The funny thing about songs like I Won't Last a Day Without You was I never played it exactly like the record.
Right.
We always played the interpretation of the way the band played it. So we'd have a chord chart and we'd learn it. And I kind of knew, how Blaine kind of fills. So I would play how Blaine kind of fills on the song, but I didn't play it like the record. And now that I do covers, I spend a lot more time trying to get closer to the record than people understand. Everybody thinks I kind of play what I want to play, and there is a little bit of me playing what I want to play or playing what became Earl in these songs.
And by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's comma there. By the way, some people love that. Like, I personally love that. I loved your drumming before I loved you. And we were, I don't know if everyone knows, we were friends and, we
Right.
were singing together and worship team and stuff like that. I loved the confidence that your playing set up for me singing. So I knew if I made a mistake, I always tried not to make a mistake, not drop a beat or come in too quickly. But I always knew that if I did, you'd fix it. You'd make it work.
Live situations are different than playing to recordings. Recordings, you can't mess with things. Like sometimes I get comments on my videos, oh, the tempo is a little weird. It's like, well, the tempo is a little weird if you listen to the song. It's not like it wasn't recorded that way. It was recorded with a bunch of guys in a room that weren't on a click, and they kind of move a little bit. So I have to find the middle space on these songs a lot of times to make it work.
Yeah.
So it's interesting doing covers, but back to your question about Hal Blaine.
Yeah, good.
The reason why I play Hal Blaine covers, I think a lot, and I decisionally play Hal Blaine covers, and I label them Hal Blaine covers, is because a few years back, actually now almost 20 years back, 15, 20 years back, when I got those concert toms. And those concert toms were part of a trade. I traded some cymbals with my friend Dan of DMR Drums, and I started collecting concert toms enough to have a kit that's about the size of Hal Blaine's kit, where now I have actually 10 concert toms. And when I started, I had 5, and then I went to 7, and then I went and found the other 2, and
you're just sneaking them into the
house.
I'm
sneaking them into the house.
You're sneaking them into the studio. I see some lights here. I'm looking at Studio B too, and like those, you stuck those lights in.
The lights are kind of cool right now, but they're cheap. The lights are cheap. They're easy to put on Amazon, and they just show up as Amazon. How many Amazon things you put on Amazon?
Oh, now come on.
Let's not. That's right.
Books are books.
Right. Bills are bills. Right.
Oh, stop.
And you pay the bills. It's Amazon. It could be one of yours. So let's not go there.
Hal Blaine.
All right. Back to Hal Blaine.
I want to say something about Hal Blaine to get you to answer me. First of all, I love all that pop music from the 60s and 70s that he was on. That, when we didn't even know each other, that's the stuff I was listening to.
Well, that's why we love it.
Oh my gosh, I love it so much.
It was AM pop radio.
Who's walking down the streets of the city, right? Like, all stuff. It's so good. But you had said something to me. Didn't Hal Blaine write to you? There's something here in a frame or something.
Oh, it's up on that wall behind you back there.
He did write to you. Yeah, like you wrote to him and said how much his drumming had meant to you.
Well, I was working with Mike Dacey. Mike Dacey was one of the Wrecking Crew guitar players. Mike Dacey became a Christian. I played with him on a few tours in the 90s. Small tours, like a week here, a week there.
Kansas City.
It wasn't Kansas City.
Wasn't it Kansas City or
no,
Kentucky?
It was West Virginia.
Close enough.
It was Kentucky. You're right. West Virginia, Kentucky. It was one of those kind of things. Pennsylvania, New York, upstate New York. I did some tours with Mike Dacey. And while I was on tour with Mike Dacey, he didn't talk a lot. I couldn't get him to talk a lot. But one time I said something to him about Hal. And I think he gave me Hal's address or something.
Is that how you got it?
I think so. Or I saw it somewhere. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure he said to me, though, just write him. And I wrote him, and Hal wrote me back. And he was very nice. Very
gracious, as I recall.
He used to love doing his correspondence, from what I understand. And So I asked questions. He got a signed letter from Hal, and he talked about his big monster setup. That was what my kit's kind of is.
And that's probably why you choose Hal Blaine songs. Didn't you tell me something once about like you love Hal Blaine, but it's like it's really Hal Blaine's equipment that got you into thinking about doing
Well,
covers.
it's the sound he got. He changed drums in the 70s. Drum kits were different than drums today. I mean, drums today, everybody's got the same sizes, it seems like. Everybody, for a while there, it seemed like everybody was going with a very small kit, and they either had big cymbals and a small kit, and it even got down in church drumming where everybody had the same kit almost, one rack tom, one floor tom, and big ride cymbals for crash cymbals and everything. And it just was so boring, so podunk. And in the 70s, it was like wide open. Like we came out of the 60s with the small Ringo kits, and then all of a sudden it was a 5-piece kit. And then all of a sudden, Ludwig discovered Hal Blaine, and Ludwig and Slingerland and Rogers, they all started making concert tom kits because all the drummers were taking the bottom heads off to get that sound.
Mm-hmm.
You just take the bottom head off, like the Doors drummer, John Densmore. He just took the bottom heads off, and you got that very one-headed sound, which sounds very cool in a microphone. Doesn't look cool. I remember I did it to my Vistalite kit. My mom said, "Put the heads back on the bottom of the drums. Don't do that." She got mad at me. This is the woman that would make me set my drums, put my drum kit away at night. Remember that story?
I know your mother.
All right, so she goes, you can't take the bottom heads off. Even though I had 2 concert toms that had no bottom heads, I thought it was better without, they had that same sound. Anyhow, I always wanted concert toms. When I got them, when I bought them, I really thought I was going to turn them into Steve Gadd drums, to be honest. He was my inspiration because Steve had a fiberglass pearl kit that he put bottom heads on. I thought, I'm just going to put bottom heads on them and make them a Gadd kit. But then the charm of the Hal Blaine kit came out, and I was in the YouTube era, and I started making YouTube videos, and guys liked it. So that kit comes out, and it's actually a fixture in Studio B now, and I do a lot of covers on that kit.
Community friends here, we keep pointing, Earl keeps pointing this way and this way because we're in the studio facing the setups
kits.
For the kits, right? So just kind of to give you a feel of where we are and how we are situated here. Yeah, so you said a lot there. So Hal Blaine, and then you went to, and you said the Doors. You know that it would be untrue.
I haven't done that one.
You know that I would be a liar.
I don't want to get into your boyfriend's albums.
Okay? Oh, stop! It wasn't my boyfriend's album. This man, I tell you something. You said something about the Doors, and then you went to Steve Gadd.
Right, Steve.
Okay,
Gadd.
I know we will talk about Steve Gadd and some of your favorite covers with Steve Gadd, but I kind of wanted to go right to Jeff Porcaro, if that's okay, because he's another one of your favorites. So one of your favorite covers is by Leo Sayer, right?
Oh, this year.
When I Need You. Wasn't that Porcaro?
That was one of them. Yeah, that was one of the Jeff Porcaro ones.
So tell us a little bit about that. About what's behind that cover. Like, what made you choose that? Did you have to look hard to find it? Was it tough to get through? Was it a challenge or was it a breeze? Tell us.
Well, first off, it was a challenge to play the song. It's not as simple to play it like the record, as close to Jeff as I could play it, is not simple. It took some time. I have this thing. I do all my drum covers within an hour. That's kind of my rule. I rarely break that. I can only think on a couple occasions where I've gone longer than an hour to learn a song.
Like if someone interrupts you and says, "I need you to help me dig this hole out there."
Yeah, that doesn't count. That's a race time. I'm talking about actual time spending on the song. Okay? I'm not talking about that. I can think of a couple covers where I went longer than an hour, but usually at about an hour, I kind of know that that's my spot playing drum covers.
Right.
Because I start messing up silly stuff. And I go, I'm past it. I can't do it anymore. I know it's like my point of no return.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that cover within an hour, but it probably was closer to 50 minutes or something. And it was just one of those songs that he played on that was just, it was a magical song. There were all these big open tom fills. And again, I used the big kit, the concert tom kit for that, and had a certain vibe and a certain sound. And I think it's one of my better covers this year.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're asking me is my better covers for the year.
Right. I'm asking you, maybe someday we'll do this show again and we'll talk about your most challenging covers.
Oh yeah.
There's so much to talk about. But on your top 10 list, you have drummers like Hal Blaine, like Jeff Porcaro, and of course Steve Gadd. So why do you choose some of his songs? What is it about the ones he's played on that draw you?
Steve Gadd, number one. You're talking about three influences here.
Three totally different influences.
They're
That's what I want to
influences.
bring in. There's different. They influence you in different ways.
Right. I mean, Jeff Porcaro had a certain influence, from hearing him in Toto, realizing he played on Boss Skaggs, watching his career, his short career, but great career, and the people he played with, realizing he played on songs I loved that I didn't know he played on, like Steely Dan's Katie Lied album, or
In Asia, did he play on?
He didn't play on Asia. He played on Katie Lied. He was one of the drummers that didn't play on Asia, believe it or not. There was about 5 drummers that are on Asia, and he's not one of them, okay? But he played on the album before that, I think, and Katie Lied is one of my favorite albums. But Asia was Gadd, was on that album. One of the drummers.
See, I knew it was one of them.
Just one of the drummers.
But Gadd influenced you in a different way. Gadd was more about feel, wasn't it?
All these drummers are about feel. I mean, the first thing I heard Gadd play that made me recognize Steve Gadd was Steely Dan Asia, probably. Mm-hmm. Even though I heard Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover and I didn't realize it was Steve Gadd. Actually, I probably did realize it was Steve Gadd. I have to go back to really thinking of my childhood now. One of the shows I watched as a kid was Saturday Night Live. And Steve Gadd was one of the early drummers on Saturday Night Live. He was one of the house drummers, kind of like Sean Pelton is today. Sean Pelton's kept that gig for 20 some odd years. He realized what it was and took it. But Gadd was a session guy. And Gadd, he didn't know how long that show was going to last. And he was one of the drummers that rotated in, him and Chris Parker. And they played together in Stuff, which I didn't know anything about Stuff till I got to college. But Gadd was one of the guys. And I saw him play 50 Ways with Paul Simon. So I knew he played on that, but the thing that made me recognizable to me was the Asia album, because the Steely Dan Asia album was one thing my friend Bob Grant, the bass player in my first band, he had that album and we listened to it and I was like amazed by it. And I had to learn Peg to play in that band.
Another good song.
And that was Rick Marotta. So Peg was a different thing, but Gadd and Rick Marotta, two ended up being two of my favorite drummers. So that's where I met Steve Gadd's playing. But then in college, I found out he played on Chick Corea's album. And then I found out he played on, Barbra Streisand. And then I found out he played on Carly Simon. Then I found out he played on with Stuff. And he played with all these different groups. Return to Forever, one of Chick's incarnations of Return to Forever had Steve Gadd on it. So Gadd played on a lot of stuff that I loved, and he became one of the staples in my influence. And the way he plays certain fills and things I kind of studied and stole from. So I stole from him. Stole from Jeff. Stole from Hal.
Did you say borrowed from them?
No, it was stealing. It's it's stealing. Every drummer knows you're stealing licks when you're taking things from certain guys that have become their thing. But what a good drummer does is you take it, you steal it, you learn it, and then you make it your own. You know what I mean? It's like that's the key to the whole thing.
Really, truly, totally, completely, and utterly different from Academe. Just so everyone knows.
Well, it's not plagiarism. Okay, we're not talking about plagiarism here. Plagiarism's a different problem. That's something else.
Well, yeah, that's not today. Today we're talking about drums.
Right. Because I can never play it exactly like Steve Gadd. I mean, I could play. Matter of fact, this is the thing that goes around the drum community a lot of times is playing it exact. And I have a friend who likes to play everything exact, he tells me. He's reading it. His feel isn't exactly like the record. I'm sorry. He just isn't. If it was exactly like the record, I'd say to him, boy, you really do have it exact. I find that if your feel is closer to the record, you're more exact than if you play all the notes that were exactly on the record.
Well, Earl, because you're talking about what it is about music that moves us.
Okay. Well, that's what music is feel. And what what I love about these guys is they have a certain feel, and I can't get Jeff's feel completely. I can get part of it. I can get the vibe that he had, but I can't really get his feel. Like he had a certain way he hits a hi-hat.
Because that's him.
That's right.
That's him. And you're you. And I have to say, being the person in your life who probably knows the most about your drumming and your career and just everything about music with you, I have to say, from the start, without being able to articulate it at 22 or whatever I was, I felt what you were feeling, what you were laying down there. It moved me. It I guess I could tell you were playing from the heart. Right. But then as I started learning about drums, because as I started, can't learn about you unless you learn about drums because it's so integral. I started realizing how much you played from your heart. Now there's different perspectives, and so your buddy who really feels about playing it note for note and reading it and whatnot, that's important to him.
Right.
Okay. And not to put that down in any way, no. But it's important to you and to me. That's what I relate to, is to play from the heart, to feel what the person is feeling that they're putting into it. And also from the perspective of a songwriter, feel what the songwriter, even if you never met the songwriter, what is she or he trying to communicate through that song? And the musicians help carry that to the public, to the listener.
Well, that's what the great studio drummers did. We're talking about three of the greatest studio drummers ever. They would hear a song, they'd listen to it, they'd figure out how their part fit with the song, and they would put their heart and soul into it and make a part.
That's right.
That's being an artist. That's being a true musician. And that's the difference between the guys who create music and the guys who just copy music. So when I'm playing a cover, I'm not trying to just copy it. I'm trying to put something of me in it, so you feel the passion I have towards the music.
Right.
That I'm getting something from the music.
Right.
So when we talk about a song like I Won't Last a Day Without You, there's this, Karen Carpenter had a certain sound to her voice.
She did.
And Richard Carpenter played certain arrangements, and the strings were saying certain things. And the oboe parts. And all this stuff going on in there, and I'm trying to fit my part in so it is not so it's not so brash and just drumming blah, 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 all over it, but it's correct. It feels melodically correct.
Right.
And to do that means I have to get into the mindset of a Hal Blaine.
Right.
When I do a cover like Friends, Chick Corea's Friends, I'm trying to get into that laid-back samba that Steve Gadd made so famous.
Yeah.
That I used to play that song in college. I would just sit there for hours in my mom's house trying to practice that song. So the fact I was able to get it for 9 minutes after only 3 takes of the song and kind of have that vibe was because I spent the last 47 years listening to the song, you know, and it's kind of in me. So
it's in you. It's in you.
Right. It came out of me because of that.
Yeah. And it's like, I was telling you this morning a little bit about this, like this whole idea of it being in you, and it kind of baked in to who you are and baked into your faculties, baked into your physiology, baked into your brain, baked into your heart. You know, that's why music makes us weep. That's why we become fans. That's why we become avid listeners, you know.
Right.
That's why we so appreciate the musicians around us who have that same, you know, that same sizzle, that same kind of passion. You know, I always loved that. I loved that. And I felt like you're drumming, and you guys now, you know, I'm not just sitting here clearly in the seat of the interviewer, like during my journalism days. Right. I'm sitting here in the state of someone who loves this man, you know, and has been watching him go. And I felt like when you play and you're really in the zone, it's almost like the beat that you're playing mimics the beat of your heart.
Well, if I'm really in the song and I'm really playing it from the heart, then that's coming through, I would say. Because I think that if you're phoning it in, then why waste your time doing it?
Well, some people, right? Like, wow, how about that person I told you about who just doesn't understand music? I was telling this young lady who was asking me about something to
the class
to take next semester, and she was asking me for advisement. I said, well, you may want to take, you're ready for an elective. It's an upper level elective, but maybe you're ready for music and the art of communication. And she just kind of looked at me like this. I said, and I didn't really know this young lady, right? And I said, well, you love music, right? I mean, if you love music, this is a great class for you because you'll be studying about goodness and beauty and art and all the ways that these things communicate. They're part of our communicative process. And she looked at me and she said, she was so sweet. And she looked at me and she said, no, I'm a realist. I really don't like music.
Right.
Well, I had to watch my face and my nonverbals because that just about knocked me off my stool. I never heard someone say that. Have you ever heard someone say, no, I'm not really into music?
I've heard people. They don't have an artistic bent in them at all.
But then she said, I'm a realist. Like, it just didn't match for me. Like, person is a realist, so they don't love music? What does it mean? Like, if you love music and you feel the music so deeply, are you an idealist? Like, I didn't get that.
Well, I don't know where she was coming from. I can't speak to her heart, but I do know that not everybody can see art and sense art, and music is art. So
Music is art.
art is different.
Yeah.
And if you're a creative and you understand art, then you're going to respond to it. And that's what I'm saying. It's like when I do drum covers, what I'm trying to do is express art. I'm trying to express my the way I play, and let the way I play basically pay homage to the great drummers I'm playing. You know, the greatest thing about doing drum covers today, where you take them out of the picture, is the fact that they were playing with great musicians, and now you get to play with that band. You get to play with great musicians. So I get to play with the greatest bass players and the greatest vocalists and stuff, and that's what the fun part is.
Yes.
Now, the one thing I did learn over the last 5 years of doing drum covers is that in a lot of ways, and I've done a lot of recording with people. It's not like I haven't done recording sessions for people, but the level of creativity that was there in these guys, I hear it. I go, wow, Jeff was like really young and he heard things. That was amazing. Now, probably it was because he was exposed to it because of his dad. His dad was one of the greatest Joe Percara, one of the greatest studio percussionists out there ever. So Joe playing music in the house, and all his brothers are musicians. So, I mean, he grew up in a musical family where music was lauded. And to your point, I grew up in a household where if my grandfather lived, maybe I would have been exposed to music that way. Like, that's what I try to pour onto my grandkids.
And you do.
And my children all got that poured onto them because you and I are creatives and we love music and we pour it on them. But when I grew up, my mom didn't know her dad, so she never really took the music thing. And my grandmother loved music, and she's the one who bought me my first drum kit. But
thank you, Matt.
We didn't have music playing in the house, and we weren't exposed to a lot of music.
Right.
You know what I mean? And my grandmother didn't have a lot of records, and they weren't playing music all the time.
Right.
So, and we didn't have Spotify, and you didn't have YouTube. You had to go out and buy a piece of music and put it on a turntable and spin it and put a needle down.
That's right.
And that took time and effort. And my family didn't do it, so I wasn't exposed to it. And then when I was exposed to it, it was kind of like, this is where my heart beats.
Yes, yes.
You know, and then I got married to you, and then we both loved it, and we always had stereos, and we always had music around us.
Yeah.
And so we've been really pouring in, but I didn't have that foundation. So when I came out of college, I mean, I don't even know how I got out of music school, to be honest. That's a whole nother story for another day. But the truth of the matter is, it is. That's a whole nother story for another.
But you did it. It's called stick-to-itiveness.
Well, that is one of my things. Stick-to-itiveness is one of my things. But what I am saying is that by the time I got out of college, where I would have wanted to jump into being a studio musician, I wasn't ready. I feel now I'm more ready to do those kinds of things than ever before. And the way we make music today doesn't speak to me like it did back in the old days.
Well, there is, I feel for you, and I feel it. I feel it deeply because I'm not a person who likes stuff on the grid either. It's not just the grid. It's the way we record. It's people in a room. Like when we did your album, we had to do it in pieces. But every once in a while, we would record together, if possible. When you put Julie and I in the walk-in closet with the two microphones, and we were doing the harmonies over my vocal.
Now you're talking about how to record an album in a bedroom. That's a whole other story.
That was over 20 years ago.
That's another experience. Yes, your whole album was done in a bedroom.
Well, there's a way.
I recorded the drums in an 11 by 11 bedroom, a box. It was literally a box.
You did a good job.
And I don't know how I got it to sound the way it did.
Well, you had a lot of help in production and post-production with your friend Steve Cruz, who did amazing work. And we had people who helped arrange, like Jim.
Well,
Jim
arrangements were part of it, but I learned a lot about recording. I learned a lot about editing. I learned a lot about the stuff I do today. That's just natural to me.
Well, we could sit here for 2 hours and talk about all this stuff, but I want to be sensitive to your audience, to your community, and knowing that, nobody usually has a whole hour to listen to something. So why don't we just wrap it up by asking one or two more questions about another cover? What's behind the cover on some of your other faves of this year? Like you mentioned Shadows by Amy Grant, or of course, I love the song "Ooh Child" by the Five Steps.
Which one do you want to talk about?
Well, if you talk about Amy Grant, I'm always going to be lighting up because she's such a light. And
Well, I picked Shadows. It's one of the songs I've done recently. And my wife is picking from a list that will come out by the end of the year of my favorite drum covers, like I've been doing the last couple of years. I do an end of the year, and now this is not going to stop me from doing my end of the year voiceover.
This was an interim list.
This was I gave her the interim list so she could hear it. What did I like about doing Shadows? Shadows number one was something we saw on the Amy Grant tour when we met Amy. You met Amy.
Greg Morrow or no?
Well, Greg Morrow was playing drums, but he didn't play drums on the album. He didn't play drums at all.
But he played on the concert, on the tour.
Yes, he played on the tour.
Greg's such a great drummer.
He's a great drummer.
We always meet him in the Forks.
Yeah, we've met him a couple times in Forks, haven't we?
In Nashville, in the drum closet.
It's pretty interesting.
So funny, like we're in Nashville 5 times in our life, and a few times that we've been there.
I've been there a few more times than that, but that's beside the point.
Well, I've only been probably 5 times tops.
Yeah, I know. But the reason I thought it was one of my better covers was, again, I had a moment. The take that ended up being released was the one where I was going for it. And usually when I get to the place where I'm playing me and it's no longer me trying to play parts, that's when I know it's the take. And that's the problem with the recording process. Just understand, I do recording sessions for people. They rarely let me get to the place where I feel comfortable with the song. Usually I'll do a take for people and they'll go, play it that way, do this that way, do that. And I do whatever they ask me to do and I play what they want. Matter of fact, I was just on another one of my friend's songs this week that came out on Spotify.
What's the name of it? Do you remember?
It's called The Deep End. It's on my friend David Urbanati's album. He just released another album. David's done a lot of work this year. I've done a lot of work with David.
Really talented musician.
But this was a song I did, I think, in 2019. We recorded it. It was one of the first things I recorded with David. And it was one of those days where David knew what he wanted. He came in, told me, and pretty much he said, play what you want to play. And then he took it and he used it. And I think I only did like 2 or 3 takes on it. And I didn't feel like I got it to the point where I loved it. But he was at the point where he loved it. And he let me, one of the things David lets me do is he lets me play me as much as I can. So I did play some outside stuff on it. And it all made it to the song. But again, it's rare that I get to be in a room and get to work it to the point where I feel like I've gone to the place I want to go with the song. I'm usually going as far as they want me to go, and then they're happy. And that's the session today. That's how you do recording sessions.
Well, it's a real blessing when you do get to be able to do what you want and what you're feeling. Sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't. But when someone trusts you enough, knows you enough to know what they've got, it's better for them. And it's better for you because it's more fulfilling. I feel the same way when I'm asked to speak, when I have a speaking engagement. Like this last one I was at in Gainesville last week. They invited me up and basically said to speak on what you wanted to speak about. They know I speak about technology and communication and relationships. And, when someone just cuts you loose, it always just feels so much better.
But then when you get cut loose and you went to the place you wanted to go, and that's why I chose Shadows. It's not so much that it's such a great song. It's that the ending part of the song, I am really letting loose. And I'm playing it the way I hear it and the way I would have heard it, probably. And I'm really going for it.
Did you make that public yet? Is that out there?
Yeah, it's out there. Yeah. It's
good. So go listen to it.
Yeah, go listen to
it. So
maybe
next time we get together for Love, Life, Wisdom, and Drums, maybe we'll talk about CCM a bit and some of the drummers and covers that you've done there. Maybe we'll talk about some of the most challenging ones.
And maybe if you guys want to ask... You want us to talk about a topic about love or life or wisdom and anything, send it in to us in the comments and we can make it a show. We're just doing this for fun. I've got some good feedback from some of my drummer friends that they enjoy this show. So if you enjoy it, leave a comment. If you like it and it's the first time you're hearing me and Steph talking about anything, please like and subscribe. Steph's got a devotional channel, which you can find on my page.
The Secret Place.
In the Secret Place. And thanks for watching and being a part of today's show.
Yeah.
Love ya.
Love you too.